Welcome back to Switzer on Australia's Business Channel. Without doubt, Australia's #1 expert on who we are, what we do and why we do it is Bernard Salt. So what are the big demographic trends that could affect real estate investment, superannuation and the stock market? For more, I'm joined by Demographer, KPMG Partner and columnist with the Australian newspaper, Bernard Salt. #1, celebrity demographer.
I don't know that those words go together, Peter, but
They don't.
I'll run with the demographics expert. I'm happy with that.
That's right. Well, no one else knows any other demographer,
No,
so
that's
therefore you're the most
exactly,
famous.
that's right.
Well, I've got you here. I always love the columns you write in the Australian, and they basically do give us insights on how we're going. Where did you come from? Where did you get this kind of information
Where
on
did
us?
I come from?
Yeah.
Well, the data actually comes from the census. I've been mining the census for about 12 months in my columns.
Yeah.
The good thing about being in demographics is that there's a census every 5 years, so there's new material.
Yeah.
And I can gnaw away at it
Yeah.
for 1 or 2 years. But business loves it. And I think the broader community is interested also in the latest trends. 23 million people are always moving, shifting, shuffling, new values, new generations, new ethnicities, and new opportunities to provide a market need, I suppose. So you need to know about the Australian demographics.
Okay, let's just talk about an example. I'll get you to throw some other ones at me that I haven't thought of, but I have thought about this one. When you're reading the housing sector data, you're seeing that investors are starting to come back in the market, but Gen Y, younger Australians aren't jumping, first-time buyers are not coming into the market. And the question is why? Is this typical of Gen Y that they don't want to participate in the game that we all fell into?
Well, I have some Gen Ys myself, so some of my best friends are children, in fact, Generation Y. But I think there has been a shift between the generations of non-commitment, if you like. I did some work some years ago and looking at the propensity of people at different times in the life cycle to buy a property.
Yeah.
At the age of 35, 60% of baby boomers in the mid-80s had bought a property.
Yeah.
15 years later, in 2001, 45% of Generation X had bought a property. So between
At age 35.
between the baby boomers and Gen X, there is a lessening of our fixation to buy a property.
Right.
And I think that same trend will carry through to Generation Y. Maybe at the 2016 census, when the average Gen Y is 35, it might only be 30% of Generation Y that actually own a property. And that merely brings Australia into line with many North American and European cultures and societies which do not have the same fixation with buying a property that we have had culturally in Australia for a generation or more.
So the fact that we're noticing that investors, a lot of the property experts who come on the program say the investors are coming back to the market, in a sense that they're making a move on the supposition that they will have plenty of clients who are happy to be renters, and rather than being hostages to the banks and that changing interest rate all the time.
Exactly. I think there is an entire generation, Generation Y, over the last decade they've been living at home with mum and dad. This is the 20-somethings with their 50-somethings. They're known as kippers, K-I-P-P-E-R-S, kids in parents' pockets, eroding retirement savings. You can't be in demographics and not have the cool acronyms. But I think that over the next decade, that generation will in fact move out of home. I don't think they're necessarily going to buy. I think they have an aversion, if you like, to that commitment, and they'll want to hedge their bets, maybe for another 10 years or so. So you might find Generation Y jumping into home ownership fully in their late 30s and 40s, as opposed to late 20s and 30s 2 generations ago.
I can remember even in the late 70s, a lot of Europeans had the belief that they could never buy an apartment or a house, therefore they rented and they built up their superannuation. Is that probably a likely trend?
I think we're pushing in that direction. I don't think we'll get to the European model. I think the Japanese have a similar sort of model. It takes maybe 2 generations to buy a property. But I think the Australian and New Zealand fixation with home ownership peaked in the 1960s, 70s and 80s with the baby boomers, and I think then since then it's subsided to a level that is more consistent with a global average. We're simply behaving more like the other parts of the developed world.
Now, there have been some doomsday merchants who said that because there's so many baby boomers set to retire, that all of a sudden things like stock markets will be affected. And I'm wondering, Are a lot of baby boomers defying expectations and wanting to keep on working, either for economic reasons or they're just scared of actually sitting home watching TV?
No, in fact, some work that I've done on the 2011 census shows that there has been a surge in baby boomers remaining in the workforce in their late 50s and early 60s like never before. Now, whether this is because their superannuation took a beating at the GFC and they have to do it, or whether they've worked out, look, I've got this lifestyle, the only way I can realistically maintain this lifestyle if I continue to work. I might not work 5 days a week, might only do 1 or 2 days a week, but that's enough to actually augment my income and provide the lifestyle that I've come to expect over the last 40, 50 years or so.
Now also, this is one thing you'd be aware of, is that the expectation of when a person dies has really pumped up, and therefore we need more superannuation. The worst thing that could happen is that you outlive your superannuation.
Exactly. The actuaries say that if you are 60 years old today, your life expectancy, rest of life expectancy, is another 25 years. You need a 25-year income source. Other actuaries say that over that 25 years, as you move towards 85, there'll be further health gains and you will actually live through to 92. So if you're 60 years old, half the population aged 60 today will in fact make it through to 92.
So you hit 60, you got a 50% chance of actually making it to 92.
Exactly, yes, that's right. Yes, well, I mean, half are going to drop off along the way, and they are mostly going to be men. It's women, in fact, who will more likely live into their 90s. So it'll be baby boomer women in their 90s that will define Australia in the 2030s and 2040s.
I'm sure you picked this up. There's a great story that Italian women are living so long that within X number of years, it'll be 90-year-old Italian women who'll be determining who governs Italy.
Right, because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think this is part of the demographic shift that we will see in Australia and beyond in the 2020s, 2030s. The big issue at the moment is the transitioning of the baby boomers out of full-time work. I think they're staying in the workforce, but they're scaling back. What we should look out for is a new trendy term to describe this. You know, we had sea change last decade. We had
tree change.
Tree change, sea change. I'm looking at the portfolio lifestyle. A bit of this, a bit of that. They will do the grey nomad thing, but they won't call it grey nomadism. These will be adventure travellers, eco-travellers. Same product, positive spin.
Are we going to see a trend where there'll be developments where people can retire into say an apartment that they own, but that apartment will have nurses and all that sort of services. So you feel independent, but you've got the kinds of things that could be in a retirement home.
I think we'll definitely see that, and I think we're seeing exactly that sort of model. And there's a couple of projects in Melbourne and Sydney at the moment that offer that, and I think that will expand much further. The reality is that there will be no single path that the baby boomers follow over the next 10, 15 years or so. There's 4.5 million of them. Some of them will go into precise the type of housing that you've talked about. Some of them will do a sea change or a tree change. The majority won't do anything. They'll just stay in situ. There'll be a business, therefore, to make over existing homes, to add on a computer room or to convert the third bedroom into a patio and alfresco dining area. So making over the suburban home to make it a lifestyle property, I think, is an opportunity in business.
Have you looked at the failure of great shopping precincts like Oxford Street? The fact that retail scenes in the old-fashioned way is tending to fail. What do you think is happening there, and what will what will fill up these empty shops in Oxford Street?
It's interesting. Everyone's been predicting the end of retail for the last 30 years or so. At the end of the day, we are still a very consumerist society. I think the advent of online retailing is a serious threat and will change the model going forward. I don't think by 2025 everyone will be ordering everything online. It's just another channel, and you might find that 10-15% of retail sales go through the internet. That means that 10-15% of retail floor space must go by the wayside, and that's more likely to be second tier, not particularly well located retail property.
And it seems I'm seeing that interesting services are taking up those shops. Like we're seeing, men now get their nails done.
Grooming.
I've been seen to do that sort of thing. I am on TV, I use my hand. But that seems to be popular. Like little shops, one-time frock shops, now might have a little gym in there exclusively for women. So, perving males aren't allowed in?
Well, there has been a major shift towards services in Australia over the last 10 years or so. In fact, one of the fastest growing jobs between the last two censuses was the job of barista.
Yeah.
We added 13,000 baristas over the last 5 years. We lost all these sheet metal workers and boiler makers and fitters and turners, but we gained all these baristas.
Far more romantic,
Now,
isn't it?
Whether this is right or wrong or good or bad, it's not the point. The point is there is a shift from making stuff to services. And if you want to pick the big picture trends, it's finding that service. And that service, coffee, lifestyle, grooming, wellness, well-being, medical technology, hips and knees, orthopaedics, these are the services of the future.
One last question, Bernard. Have you looked at why Australia has been, in a sense, so negative towards the federal government? Has that ever been an issue? I know you're a political analyst.
I think it's part of the Australian way. We are a sceptical people.
Yeah.
It's contempt for authority that I think goes right back to the convict era.
Yes.
It's a bit of convict in us all, I suppose. But I think that's the Australian way. We have contempt for authority, and that is reflected in our scepticism with regard to.
And do we get frustrated when Parliament fails? Like, obviously, the hung Parliament, independence, does that frustrate us, and as a consequence, we become intolerant of failure?
Well, I do think that there is a consumer blockage at the moment, and that's because we're unsure of the future. Almost like a psychographic shift, like a rabbit caught in headlights. We don't know which way to go. Consumers are frightened about making a decision. I'm hoping that with the federal election in September, it will unlock. It'll be a circuit breaker, and all of a sudden, consumers will feel confident to bid up property values, to spend a bit on their credit card, and there'll be a release in consumer spending as a consequence of that circuit breaker later in the day.
Well, I've been punting on that as an economist trying to predict the future. I'm glad that the most famous demographer in the country agrees with me.
Very good.
Bernard, thanks for joining us on the
My
program.
pleasure.